Blah blah blah. So blah, you blah blah, go blah, kick it blah. Bad romance. You know you like this one. All right. All right, let's begin. So, today's video, we're going to be talking about some things that people have asked me. I went online into one of our private Facebook groups that we have, and I asked, what kind of videos you guys want me to do. I want to do more Gumroad videos, and some things it's harder for me to come up with. I think there's things that I think people want to hear, but it's better just to ask the people, and so that's what I did. And one of the things that they suggested for a Gumroad video was more about like production and how that works in the world of which that looks like in terms of working in the industry. And I felt like, this doesn't have to be a paid video. This is TV free. And so I'm going to do this. I'm going to talk about it. And there's actually a couple of them that I thought I can just talk about. It doesn't really need to be a whole 1 hour structured video. Although I find that those are valuable to people, and I should put a reasonable cost to that. But some things I feel like people should just know, and this is one of those things. So the production, for anyone who is confused, and I like to try to tell people who are other instructors and whatnot, you shouldn't assume. And one of the things is you shouldn't assume with this is that people know how video games are made or how movies are made. So I'm going to talk about my experience and what I've seen throughout these different fields of entertainment. So we'll talk about three of them. We'll talk about video games, we'll talk about film and animation, and then we'll talk about comic books or graphic novels. I think that'd be good. So they're all relatively the same, in which they all start with a pre-production, and then they have a production, and then they have a post-production. Pre-production in the scope of, or keeping it really simple, is pre-production, just lots of words, lots of art. Production, lots of making from the words and art, and then post-production, fixing anything that might be broken, and then releasing it to the public, adding effects and whatnot. So let's start with, I was going to start with video games. So video games, specifically in terms of pre-production, you will just have lots of time spent making concept art, writing game design docs, writing stories for the game if there is any, and you're doing a lot of that. But what you really need to do is get to the building of the game as quick as possible, because to make a good game you got to play the game. And one of the things that I think a lot of developers who have a hard time making a video game or find themselves struggling is that they don't have a game to play. Like a lot of it, you can come up with all these ideas and all this stuff, but if you don't have something that you can start playing with, even if it's very simple, you can't really see if it has any fun or value to it. So one of the things that I tell people in terms of pre-production is that pre-production and production are kind of welded together in game development. As in that when I draw a concept, it needed to be done so that way we can start modeling it. And modeling is basically taking my concept from someone's idea and building the actual asset that then goes to an animator who actually makes things move, and then from there, you put it through the game, and you start to play the game and start to test it, and you start to see if it's any good. And eventually it gets to the point where you go into the point where you go into alphas. Open alphas are basically you're letting people in, seeing the junk of a game you got, but people are very aware, at least educated people are very aware alphas are it's real dirty, it's just real broken, but it's giving you a clue of what the game's about. And then the final stage, which is the betas and then the final release or post, is basically now the game's pretty much done, but let's give it to a large group of our fans or supporters and see what they think and see if they can find stuff that we could not find. And you just do a lot of Q&A, and you're just constantly cleaning it up. And that's pretty much what it is. So depending on where you want to work puts you somewhere in this timeline. So as a concept artist, what my daily jobs were, and I can only really speak for myself, my jobs were specifically someone would come up with an idea. They say, hey, we have an idea. What if you did this? we were thinking like this thing had like giant swords or it flies or whatever, but we need to look. We didn't know what it looks like, and that's where a concept artist comes in. They tell me their ideas, they tell me their vision, and then I draw as many sketches and designs as I need to until finally everyone kind of agrees that this is cool, this is awesome, let's go with that. And that's when you go into the next stages of production. And this is relatively the same in film and even in graphic design or graphic novels and comics. But the differences are very subtle in terms of the work environment. So let's say for video games, it's a little bit more like there's a longer span. But in film, the difference is that you still have the pre-production, production, and post-production, but they're very much separated versus video games. For example, pre-production for film, you go in, you work on concepts for a few months, and then you're out. And you'll perhaps never meet the director. You'll never really meet the people who will build the things that you have built. But what will happen is that you will start your concepts and finish your concepts, and they'll be out there and whatever. And then you don't even know if they chose them or they're going to make them. You have no idea. You're just kind of off to the next project, the next process of the wheel of making something. And then production is when the director goes out to sets, starts filming, starts doing all that stuff, starts getting the footage, and then they go into basically post, which is putting all the special effects, cutting and editing all the actors in and out of environments, putting them in, making it look like a cohesive story, a visual story, and then putting it out there and hoping that the audiences care about what's being told to them in the film. And so that's why a lot of people will have these kinds of complaints about films. They think that making a movie is really easy sometimes, or even if you don't think it's easy, you think like, why is Hollywood screwing it up all the time? And it's not really because the Hollywood's screwing it up. It's because of the way the system is built. It's because it's like so segmented, and sometimes producers don't work with the same directors, and new directors work with new producers, and that's constantly in flux. And new artists are working with other artists. You never really work with the same people sometimes. And it's constantly like that. And what ends up happening is that you never really ground yourself in terms of how people are. Like if you've never worked with somebody before and you have only a few months to work with them, it's sometimes not a very easy adjustment. And that's just part of the gig. Where if we look at animation, like companies like Pixar and other companies like DreamWorks or Blue Sky, although DreamWorks had a very huge hit recently, but Disney as well, they work a lot better in most cases because they do try to build a family type system and people try to communicate together. In most cases, specifically speaking for Pixar and Disney at the moment, it works really well because you grow up with your animators, your modelers, your concept artists, your technicians, your programmers, your software engineers. You know them, they're friends. Your kids go to school together. You guys take your kids to play school together. You go on vacations with each other, so perhaps dinner and lunch. So you're more accustomed to how people are when you're with them more often. And so that work environment sometimes is very, very positive for creative improvement. And then you have like graphic novels and comic books, which I don't really know much about, but I can kind of give you at least my subtle, my small insight. But I'm pretty sure it's the same. And if you've done any of these, you're kind of prepared for the others a little bit more than you would if you didn't do any. But comic books are pretty much the same. They outsource every little aspect of the comic book, from even the writing to the art to the concepts, and it's all segmented. And again, the difference here is sometimes people don't even actually have a physical contact with the person that they're working with. Like the art director or the person in charge is doing everything via email. Like the artist who's drawing all the pencils of the comic will maybe never meet his colorist and maybe never meet the writer. And so it's a little bit more isolated, but it's a faster world. Everything is just done immediately, and you get paid by the day type of thing. And that is pretty much all I can say about it, and as much as I know. I've only done concept art for a comic. I've never really done any pages for a comic or stuff like that. And the stuff that I did for a comic were very, very, I don't think they even used it. But there was stuff that I did for advertisement that I can compare to film, also to kind of segue a little bit to a different topic is that like the speed of comics is like how I feel like the speed of film is to advertisement. Like advertisement is super fast paced. Like they needed everything yesterday, and comic books I feel like is like very similar, but maybe in the moral realm of I don't really have anything else to compare it to really. But it's just this world of comic books is a very fast world. Same thing with advertisement, and so hopefully this gives you some more insight if you didn't have any before. And I wish you guys the best of luck. And so now you shouldn't be entirely surprised if you guys get a job and you're like, what is this place? What do I do? And it's important to start to talk to everybody else that's in the room with you and people that work with you, so you learn more about that creative development and become a little more wiser and start making concepts that are probably useful to people. So anyways, thank you guys, and I'll catch you guys around next time.